Build AI agents 3 times faster with this prompting agent. Whenever I'm building something new, one of the most frustrating and time-consuming steps of the process, in particular for AI agents, is writing prompts. And I'm sure you've experienced the same and can relate to this. It takes a lot of time and effort to get a prompt that often barely works. It can be really painful. You're asking questions like, where do I even start? What do I ask it to do? How do I structure this? What context should I actually give the prompt? And then low quality outputs. We've all seen an AI agent or ChatGPT come back to us with really poor quality outputs, too much information, too little information, changes between each prompt, and lots more issues that you've probably experienced when writing your own prompts. What I'm about to share with you in this video is not perfect, but it will make the whole process a lot more simple and straightforward and take you 80% of the way to a really comprehensive prompt. You'll be building more efficient AI agents in less time and less headache. So let me show you what it can actually do. So when you're ready to start building out the template, you're going to come to school.com/scrapes. You're going to head to the classroom and go to the plug and play templates for your business. And you can see we've got all of the different templates here for all aspects of your business, but you're going to go to the agent essentials and you're going to go to the prompt agent. And we're going to download by clicking and downloading this template. You're going to open up your workflows in N8N and you're going to go create new workflow. And all you're going to do is import from file, click on the latest, download, and that will load up your prompt engineer template. We're just going to rename that to whatever you want. And you'll have a few nodes that will appear red here, and you just need to start filling out the different credentials, and then it should work straight off the bat. Now I'll show you exactly why this is going to speed up your prompt building. So we're going to open up the form here inside N8N, and we've got this introduction to the prompt agent where it tells you it's going to return a complete prompt full with inputs, tools, constraints, error handling scenarios, output format, etc. So the whole package that you're going to need for a prompt. And I've not seen yet a consistent agent like this that outputs not only LLM prompts, but also prompts that are fit for tools agents in N8N. And that's exactly what this is going to give us. So we need to provide a short summary of the goal of the prompt, and then it's going to give us a few questions. So for this demonstration, we're just going to talk about a content repurposing agent. So say we want to go from a video to a LinkedIn post. Let's use that as our scenario and see what we get. So for the goal of the prompt, we've put something really generic, a content repurposing agent from video to LinkedIn posts. So kept it really broad and high level. Does it need access to any tools? So we've got options here. We've got yes, if we know that we're going to access any tools, and a tool might be web search, it might be LinkedIn. So in this case, we're probably not going to need access to any tools because we're taking an input video and we're outputting content to LinkedIn. So we just need it to polish it up a bit. The next question is around tools. So if yes, what tools should the agent have access to? And then we've given some examples here, web search, Google Calendar, etc. But we don't need that for this. And then what are the expected inputs? So we know that we've got a video input and the expected outputs are a LinkedIn post. So as you can see, super generic, took us about 30 seconds to fill this out, maybe less. And let's click next. What it's then going to do is start running, and it's going to actually then come back with a series of questions, up to 3 questions, to help refine the detail of our prompt. And it's going to help us go from a really broad prompt goal to a specific output by asking us the right questions. So it says answer the below clarification questions in as much detail as possible. And then it's given us our original query back, a content repurposing agent from video to LinkedIn post. Is there a specific tone or style you want the final LinkedIn post to reflect? So you can see how it's building out its logic around what things it would write in the prompt. So we're just going to write informal with some emojis. And we'll click answer. We've got the second question. What key elements or sections from the video should be emphasized in the LinkedIn post? And because it's a LinkedIn post and it's short form content, we're just going to say focus on one key theme from the video. And then it says, are there any length or formatting constraints for the LinkedIn post? It's a good question. Let's go out and find out. So the character limit for a LinkedIn post is 3,000 characters. So actually we can feed that back into our tool. And you can see how that's now building up a picture of what our prompt should be like. So we've come in here into the N8N workflow, and you can see that we've got this form trigger that we just ran through. It's then going to ask us some clarification questions in a loop. So it comes up with 3 questions that are specific to understanding the goals of our prompt. And now the prompt is being generated in a specific format. Super simple 3-stage process. And it's going to return to us our complete prompt. And if we take a look at the outputs here, we can come into the return form and we will open up the outputs here. And this is our complete prompt. And you can see from really broad goals that we input at the start and answering the clarification questions, it's now built out a really comprehensive prompt that's going to give us a really strong starting point, which is often the hardest part when you're writing prompts. So let's run through and see what it's actually given us here. You're an expert AI content repurposing specialist that transform video content into engaging LinkedIn posts. So it's given it a really clear role. You identify key themes, condensing complex information into a social media format. You excel at adapting content to LinkedIn specific platforms. So we've not told it any of this. This is what it's come up with by itself. It's then given us some constraints or requirements. And you can see it's pulled in our additional information about 3,000 characters, but also told it to have an optimal length. Without us saying anything, it knows that the first 200 to 250 characters need to be the hook or the most compelling. And it's done that without us having to tell it that. So it's probably done a web search on LinkedIn posts to find that out for us. Maintain the original message integrity, and it's input today's date. And it's even put a comment at the end here. Do not include direct calls to like, comment, or share. So we don't want our post to appear spammy. It's then given us some clear inputs. So the video content itself, and then some optionals around additional context that we might want to feed into the agent when we're generating this content. It's then given us a really clear set of instructions. Process and analyze the video provided. Identify the core themes. Craft a LinkedIn post, review and optimize the post. So from really broad goals, it's come up with a step-by-step that the agent can follow. And this is a really powerful format for working directly with LLMs and tools agents, is giving them that step-by-step that it can follow through in a logical process and iterate and work on that. It's then got conclusions, which is our output format. And it's told it to deliver a well-crafted LinkedIn post that covers a bunch of different criteria. And then finally, we've got these solutions, which is effectively our error handling. So for example, if the video contains multiple equally important themes, I'll ask the user which one to prioritize for the post. If the post exceeds character limits, I'll suggest areas to condense while preserving key insights. So this additional section means that if we were to run this AI agent, it would be doing its own error handling and not error at all of these different scenarios, because it's got an out. It's got some assumptions that it can follow instead of having to come back to the user. So you can see from just a really broad prompt and not really knowing what we wanted to get out of it, it's come up with a 80 to 90% starting point that we can go and test in an AI agent by just coming in here, copying that whole content, taking it to a separate node. Let's say it's an LLM chain. We define this below, hit expression, open the window and paste it in. There we already have our complete AI agent within about a minute of work, which is going to massively speed up the rate at which you can build these agents and focus on the important things like connecting the right tools and prompting it to interact with those tools. So you may be wondering at this point, how did it come up with that prompt and what rules is following? So I'm going to run through now the best way I've found to prompt tools agents that uses an acronym, critics, to cover all of the key elements that make up a really solid prompt. The prompt. Now the prompt is where we tell the AI agent or an LLM like ChatGPT the rules that it needs to follow and what it needs to return to us. So I thought long and hard about different acronyms that could make this easy, because actually a comprehensive prompt contains quite a lot of information. And the best one I could find was critics. So we're going to go through each of those steps, but it's a really stable prompting format for creating prompts again and again for these AI agents and even for LLMs, just minus the tools. So I've simplified each one here, and we'll start with the one that most people are familiar with, which is role. We had to switch around the C and the R to make a word, but the only two that are not in the correct way we lay it out in the prompt are the first two, which we switch around. So we'll start with role or scope. And this is essentially asking or telling the AI what it is an expert of. So in our case, we're telling it is a scheduling agent, and its overall objective is to schedule meetings on our behalf. We then have constraints or rules, which naturally are the rules it needs to abide by. So this is where we set the boundaries, the limitations, and the guidelines for our AI agent prompt. So an example might be, don't book meetings without confirming with us first. We then tell it what it's expecting to receive in the inputs. And if you can, it's always best to include examples as we go through these to make it really clear. I treat this as if you were training a human to do the same task. What information would you need to provide to them to make it really clear exactly what you mean? And then the AI agent is going to fill in the ambiguity by making assumptions. We've then got tools. So this is specifically for tools agents, and not all AI agents and not all LLM prompts will need tools. But if you do, it's what resources can I access? So an example here is if we wanted it to have access to the web and web search, then we'd give it a web search tool like Tavily or Perplexity. But in our case, that's going to be the Google Calendar tool, but not just the tool, it's the functions that we're calling from that tool. So we've got create event, we've got check availability, get events, delete events, and all of these different tools that's able to access and use in different ways. So we need to explicitly tell it what that tool or function is for, and therefore it will know how to use it later in the tasks. So the next part is actually telling it the order of tasks it's going to follow. So a good way to structure this is for each tool, giving it a step-by-step, okay, you're going to create an event. So the first thing you're going to do is check the user input. For any attendees, the description and the start and end time of the calendar invite. You're then going to call the create event tool to create event. And finally, you're going to return a success message to the user. So that is our instructions for that specific tool. And laying it out on a tool by tool basis makes it really straightforward. One, to read, and two, to follow that task list exactly. The more specific we can give instructions to our prompt and to our LLM running it in the back end, the more success we're going to have when testing this out. And the last two are really critical. We've got conclusions, which we sometimes call output format. And we give really clear examples of what output we're expecting here and the expected response formats. And then finally, we've called this solutions, which is the solutions we need if we come across an error. So it's also error handling. And this answers the question, what do I do if I don't get the information I expected to receive? So for example, if somebody asks to create an event, but they don't give any details around time, attendees, name, etc., then what should the model do in response to that? Should it make it up? Probably not. It should actually reach back out to the user and request more details. So an easy way to remember this is critics, and it's a really clear prompt structure. So now that you understand how to write a clear prompt, and you understand that the prompt agent is actually working through all of these different categories, let's take a look at the key themes in this automation and show you exactly what's happening. We have three key areas. We have the trigger. So we are using an N8N form to trigger the request here. So inside the form trigger, we've got the form description here. And then we've got all the different fields in the prompt request that the user fills out on the next page, like we saw at the start. So we've got the what is the goal of your prompt, Does it need access to any tools? What tools? Expected inputs and outputs. And you can see that that carries through, and we combine that into a query that is then sent for clarification. So all of those questions are combined here from the previous node, and that's sent to the first LLM call, which is a clarification LLM. And we're using O3 Mini for this. And before I show you exactly what that is, I just want to shout out Jim Lee UK on the N8N templates library that inspired me to use the form trigger and ask these clarification questions to get more detail. I think it's a really awesome approach. And you can find it on the Host Your Own AI Deep Research Agent on the N8N template library. It's an amazing template itself, but in particular, I love this starting point where it asks clarification questions back to the user in order to gather additional detail for the research or for the prompt. It's a really powerful tool and very clever implementation. So thank you, Jim, for that. So what it does is effectively we've got a prompt in here and we say, given the following query from the user, ask follow-up questions to clarify the inputs, outputs, use of tools, but we've told it only ask the things that you don't understand from the input. So it can ask up to 3, but it doesn't need to if it understands. And then we've put the input queries in here, and you can see that all of our input information has gone into that input query there. So that's what it's asking clarification questions on. And we're using O3 Mini because it's able to logically think through all of those different questions and consider aspects that maybe we haven't before. In this structured output parser, we're telling it to output questions effectively. So inside the questions, we split out each individual questions, run that round a loop, and we're actually using the next form page to ask that specific question as it goes through. So that's the first and second parts that effectively get all of the information that's then fed into our prompt agent tool to write a really comprehensive starting point for our prompt. So inside the prompt agent tool, you can see again, like all tools agents, like all LLMs, we've used this critic structure with role and constraint swap round. And we've effectively told it is a specialized prompt generator for creating structured prompts for AI agents as well as LLMs. And it's going to follow this critics framework. And we explain what the critics framework is inside the prompt. We've then got the constraints, so the rules it needs to follow, always maintain the critic structure. Then we've got some rules around tool parameters, so format tool parameters clearly with indentation. We've got this never assume tool capabilities without confirmation. So when it generates the tools in here, you'd have a tool for each function that the prompt would be able to generate. So say, for example, we're creating a calendar scheduling agent. You would have several functions. You'd want one that connects to your Google Calendar to create events, one that connects to delete events, one that wants to get your availability, so get events. So you'd have several different tools, and it should never assume tool capabilities without going and checking that first with the web search that we've attached to this. So the web search down here searches using Perplexity, and it passes in a search term to go and search the web for information about the tools, for example. And we've even built out the ability to edit an existing prompt. So you can paste in here an existing prompt and actually turn it into that critics framework and have it clarify certain things about your prompt. If no tools are needed, like we suggested at the start, then it's going to skip the tools section. If tools are needed, it's going to build out each individual tool like this. So we're going to have a web search tool, a create event tool, a delete event tool, etc. And each of those, it will make an assumption based on its own knowledge and research on the web, what input parameters it would need there. And then again, we've got really clear instructions, how to complete a critics prompt, rules for handling incomplete requests, rules for refining existing prompts. And each of these individual functions has been separated into a separate set of steps. So we've got 1 to 9 here, 1 to 4 here, and 1 to 4 here. So it understands which set of instructions to follow. And if we had multiple tools in here, it would build out instructions for each individual tool, and that's how it's laid out. We've then got the last two sections, which are conclusions. So ask it to return the complete critics formatted prompts with all required sections. Switch around the C and the R, so role always comes first, and that's what we're used to. And then we've told it about the formatting. XML tag structure. So we've got these opening and closing tags that just denote the starting and ending of each section. And that is because LLMs have been trained on XML tags. So it's a really clear way to tell the prompt that this is the start and the end of our instructions, for example. And then we've got some error handling scenarios. So if the agent type is unclear, don't return a prompt, ask for clarification instead. If the tools are not specified, suggest appropriate tools based on its own knowledge. And if the user provides an existing prompt, analyze it and suggest improvements, but don't change the core functionality. And then finally, we pass in the query. And that query is effectively what we are telling it to make a prompt of. And you can see it's made up of our initial query with all the information about goal, access to tools, expected inputs and outputs, but it also contains all of the clarification questions and answers, which builds out a much better picture of what prompt it needs to start generating for our AI agent. And then the final thing is we then return that to the form. And that just displays the prompt on the actual form. You can just go directly to the form URL and actually test this out once you've installed it in your environment. The last thing to mention is we've included a chat trigger, which skips the whole stage of having to ask clarification questions. I definitely advise going through the form trigger because it asks you the right questions to build out a complete prompt. But if you know what you're doing with prompting and you don't need those clarification questions, you can actually just go directly through the chat trigger. And I'd recommend doing that if you were editing an existing prompt, and then we'd just activate the buffer memory so that we could interact back and forth with the agent that would update our existing prompt. Feel free to head to the school and grab the template, but I hope that helps you speed up your AI agent builds.